Good afternoon. We are doing it live right here, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks finishing higher today as the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ recovered most of the losses we saw in the previous session after the Chinese AI startup DeepSeek spooked Wall Street. In fact, sent shockwaves through the markets yesterday, with the NASDAQ plunging more than 600 points at the close. Different story here today. Some analysts see this as a Chinese shot across the bow at the U.S. tech sector. I'll be discussing that in greater detail later this hour with China expert Gordon Chang, the author of The Coming Collapse of China, The Great U.S.-China Tech War, and his latest book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of 137 points, extending its gains this week, ending at 44,850. The S&P 500 recovering today 55 points higher to 6,067, snapping a two-day losing streak. The NASDAQ surging just about 400 points, not quite erasing yesterday's big loss, a gain of just about 2% and settling at 19,733, the best day for the NASDAQ since January 15th. Investors turning their attention now to the earnings parade this week. Also amid concerns that the Chinese AI model could challenge American companies' dominance in the sector and their valuations that have powered the bull market for the past couple of years. Microsoft, Meta, Tesla, all due to report quarterly earnings tomorrow after the closing bell. And Apple will be reporting on Thursday. Apple stock, by the way, was higher again today. Also, the Federal Reserve kicked off a two-day policy-setting meeting today with Fed funds futures traders now expecting no change in interest rates, short-term rates from the current range of 4.25% to 4.5%. This is the first Fed policy meeting of 2025. The Fed will release its policy decision tomorrow at 11 o'clock Los Angeles time, followed by a full-blown news conference a half an hour later by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. What's going to happen tomorrow? What is the outlook for mortgage rates, short-term interest rates this year, and indeed the economy under President Trump? I'll talk about that later this hour live with Greg McBRIDE, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate. JetBlue in the spotlight today. It's tumbling about 26%, pulling back from an 18-month high. Investors focusing on JetBlue's weaker-than-expected earnings guidance for a key revenue metric rather than on its upbeat fourth-quarter results. According to MarketWatch, the stock had its biggest one-day percentage drop on record. At least since 2002, JetBlue shares fell after the closing bell yesterday at their highest price since 2023, a couple of years ago now, back in July of 2023. The firestorm recovery is underway here in Southern California today. Lakers great Magic Johnson and Dodgers chairman Mark Walter launched a new private sector initiative to help rebuild Los Angeles. In the fire disaster areas, the effort is being called LA Rises, with the idea of providing financial help from the private sector to rebuild areas devastated by the fires, including the Palisades and Eaton Fire in Altadena. Magic Johnson, as well as the others, will be leading the effort. The Mark Walter Family Foundation and the LA Dodgers Foundation provided an initial commitment of $100 million. Also, Casey Wasserman, the head of LA 28, the Olympic Committee chair and president, will also help lead the effort. Meanwhile, in Washington, a federal judge today temporarily blocking a push from President Trump to pause federal funding while his administration conducts an across-the-board ideological review to uproot progressive initiatives. The Trump administration plan plunged the government into some confusion today, set the stage for a constitutional clash over control of taxpayer funds. We also heard from the White House today that they will begin offering buyouts worth 7 months of salary to all federal employees who opt to leave their jobs by February 26. This, too, another big announcement, part of President Trump's unprecedented overhaul of the U.S. government. Joining us now on Your Money, the markets, the economy, the whole works. Joining us live now is Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
My pleasure, Frank. You know, this DeepSeek phenomena that became so, headline on Monday, actually could be viewed as a black swan event. As we know, black swans are very rare in nature. You don't see them. Most swans are white or maybe gray, but black swans are unexpected developments that have mostly negative consequences. They've been known to cause recessions. They've been known to cause major disruptions. 2008 was a black swan event when the financial system unexpectedly collapsed. A commercial paper collapsed. Is DeepSeek one of these? No, I don't think so. There were winners yesterday when NVIDIA and some of the other tech names fell so hard. Those 7 companies of the 500 Standard & Poor's companies were down, but the other 493 companies on balance did pretty well. And the reason is that it's now, if DeepSeek is true to its promise of delivering cheap artificial intelligence, free chat GPT, then these other 493 companies mean they'll have access to very affordable AI, and that's going to be profitable.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management, based here in Southern California. Certainly that NVIDIA drop yesterday was quite significant. In fact, a record-shattering drop as far as market cap is concerned. Today, a rebound for NVIDIA. I meant to mention this earlier, closing higher by $10.57 to $128.99, a gain of 9% after yesterday's big drop. What about NVIDIA here?
Well, they founders of DeepSeek in China, and they're not saying a whole lot, but they did say that they used 50,000 NVIDIA chips, but the cheaper chips. They also added that they spent far, far less to develop DeepSeek than ChatGPT and the AI models. So for NVIDIA, well, that's not great news. DeepSeek isn't going to cause the Federal Reserve to raise or lower interest rates. It's not going to cause a financial crisis or a credit crunch. It probably won't cause a recession, but it may it might have negative, earnings results for NVIDIA, and that's what we saw in the panic sale yesterday. A little bit of a recovery today because NVIDIA is so widely adopted. It still has forward momentum, but this DeepSeek surprise, that's a black swan.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere. DeepSeek burst onto the scene over the weekend, and then Sunday night we saw the futures move lower and had a rough start to trading yesterday morning, and the NASDAQ ended up lower, down to more than 600 points, recovering today by nearly 400 points. So a lot of talk about, we did hear Black Swan mention, also dot-com bubble type event.
Yep.
Kind of reminded me of the day the NASDAQ died years ago, right? During the dot-com bubble days. Are we seeing something similar here?
Yeah, the tide goes out and not everybody's got their swimsuit on. DeepSeek's success has been noticed by China's top political circles. The day that DeepSeek's founders released this to the public, the Chinese premier, Li Qiang, I think is how you say it, according to the state agency news there, he was present at the gathering, and they're excited about DeepSeek's success because it could be important to Beijing's policy goal of getting around Washington's export controls and achieving some independence in the strategic industries like artificial intelligence.
Right, and what got people's attention that suddenly this was the biggest thing on the Apple App Store. So Apple stock actually rose yesterday and again today, by the way, ahead of its earnings news, which we'll be getting on Thursday. What about Apple in all of this?
Well, Apple, for some perspective, it's just been amazing, phenomenal how well Apple has done. You've made over 10 times your money in the last 8 years. And by the way, Warren Buffett still owns a gigantic slug of Apple, even after trimming his position. But AI wants a piece of this AI revolution. I mean, let's face it, the AI models like DeepSeek and ChatGPT they've all been trained by reading, for the most part, every single book in the world, and they do it right away. So this is the kind of intelligence that's coming to the average person on the planet. Apple's going to be a part of that.
That is exciting. It is exciting, and I love the way you put it. That's right on target here. Now, we saw wild ride for cryptos. I know, as you know, we talked to the biggest fans of crypto as well as the harshest critics, but it looks like even Warren Buffett has warmed up to crypto in some fashion. Looks like he has gotten into a Brazilian digital banking company that has its own cryptocurrency platform. So he once described crypto as a rat poison, but looks like he's warmed up to crypto. What are your thoughts on crypto here now?
Well, I think he and his staff, they've warmed up to blockchain, which is an amazing innovation for transferring instantaneously information and data, and almost invisibly. What do I think about Bitcoin? Well, the Trump administration has set up a crypto presidential advisory council. They're helping pull off the president's more difficult promises here. They've got a new AI and a crypto czar, Mr. David Sachs, and also, the government has a stash of roughly 200,000 Bitcoin that it acquired through criminal seizures and other forfeitures. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Trump administration decides to hang on to those 200,000 Bitcoin and make that part of the reserve.
Very interesting. And we did see a Bitcoin plunge yesterday in this DeepSeek episode, but it got down around 97,000 yesterday, rebounding today at the moment above 101,000. Ethereum has taken a hit lately, right now hovering just above 3,000 at 3,096 here at last check, and Doge at the moment at 32 cents. We'll take a closer look at that coming up here as well. So we're watching all of this impact, and supposedly even the DeepSeek story impacted the price of oil, which continues to be under pressure here today, following, of course, the big presidential announcement last week of Drill Baby Drill and a much more fossil fuel-friendly administration promoting domestic oil production. Now we see oil hovering at around $73.88 a barrel here. What about oil in all of this?
Well, Frank, there's a role that geopolitics is playing in oil and energy prices in general. For example, if there are more sanctions against Iran, and the oil supply were to drop by, say, 1 million barrels a day, that would reflect the tighter, sanctions enforcement. Where would oil be? It probably, based on a Goldman Sachs analysis that I recently saw, maybe oil would settle in higher, the mid-80s per barrel, but then you've got drill baby drill. So that offsets it. On the other hand, the broader than expected tariffs from the Trump administration might drive down the price of oil in the medium term. So I wouldn't sell oil. For example, nuclear power is going to be a key part of this new energy infrastructure, these data centers that technology companies have been investing in, and nuclear plays a role, but it doesn't go anywhere without natural gas. So you're going to build the green data center, you better have some natural gas as well.
All right. And gold still hovering near its all-time high here at 2,770. We saw the dollar recently give back some of its gains against other major currencies. In fact, we're at 104 versus the euro, at 155 against the yen, and we're 124 against the pound. What about gold, and what about the dollar here?
Well, for about 2 years straight, the People's Bank of China has been acquiring gold every month. They increase their holdings, and the World Gold Council is now saying that India and Singapore have also been buying up gold to hedge against the global economic turbulence and also currency fluctuations. So, where is gold going to go? I mean, I agree with some analysts like Erdeni, for example, who's predicting 3,500 by the next year or so. There's potential, 25, 30% upside here, and it still wouldn't be inflation adjusted to where we were in 1987, vis-a-vis, the cost of living well.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management. And, of course, the focus of attention here in the Los Angeles area is largely on the recovery efforts now following the devastating and deadly fires we experienced over the past couple of weeks. And certainly commodity prices also in focus in all of this with the massive rebuilding effort about to begin. Obviously, there's going to be a tremendous demand for building materials, including lumber, and the list goes on. The economic impact of all of this still being assessed in what looks to be the worst natural disaster in U.S. history from a dollar standpoint. Gabriel Wisdom, what are your thoughts about how this is going to be impacting the economy and the markets here?
It's interesting, Frank. 7 of the biggest home insurers, 12 of them in total, but 7 of them limited their exposure to California over the last 2 years, where they pulled out completely. 69% of the State Farm policies that were eliminated were the Pacific Palisades area. And for the last year, state regulators have been requiring insurance companies to set their rates solely based on historical experiences, but that's changing. So premiums are going to go quite a bit higher. And with that, insurance companies are going to be forking out the settlements. Plus, you mentioned Magic Johnson and all these wonderful efforts, and the governor, I know, is intent on accelerating the building situation. President Trump was out here, said the same thing. So what will it do to commodity prices? It certainly won't push them down. So I want to have some exposure there in a diversified portfolio. Lumber, you mentioned. Copper in particular is cheap. Copper is, you need it for everything from data centers to iPhones, and certainly for home building. So copper would be my top play.
All right, tomorrow we'll be hearing from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell after the policy statement and a decision on interest rates comes out from the Federal Reserve. Any surprises expected tomorrow?
Well, there might be a Fed effect on the market downturn Monday, but I doubt it. I think the Federal Reserve is more interested in how much cheaper artificial intelligence models might become due to this, this new deep seek phenomena. And if that happens, then it means that corporations become more profitable, more productive quicker because it's cheaper. And there's a huge disinflationary tailwind to consider here. If the Fed determines that there'll be, a reduction in inflation due to low cost to adopt AI, they might just leave rates alone or even cut them.
Very interesting. And at this point, Gabriel Wisdom, any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Frank, last time I was on, I mentioned the dogs of the Dow. These are the 5 or 10 worst performing stocks from the prior year in the Dow Jones 30. And interestingly, on Monday, as the NASDAQ was falling hard, a number of these stocks did quite well. Verizon, Chevron, McDonald's, Procter & Gamble, Cisco, IBM, Coca-Cola. And I think that's going to be a theme for 2025 because it's time. It's just been too long. And then on the income front, I like short-term treasuries. I think 4% state tax-free is pretty attractive. And companies that regularly increase their dividends provide shareholders with a pay raise whenever they increase that dividend. My favorites there are Texas Pacific Land, Costco, MasterCard, Intuit, and I'd say Broadridge Financial, symbol BR, looks attractive.
Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director of American Money Management, based here in Southern California, also author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel, it's always great to speak with you. Thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Right out to the freeways we go now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. We'll take a deep dive into DeepSeek with China expert Gordon Chang coming up here live momentarily. The stock market rebounding a bit today from that DeepSeek sell-off we saw, which caused the NASDAQ to plunge more than 600 points at the closing bell yesterday. Today, the NASDAQ regained 392 points at the closing bell, up nearly 400 points today to 19,734. The Dow up 137 at 44,850, and the S&P 500 recovered 55 points to 6,068. The yield in the 10-year note now at 4.54%. Looks like Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines among the winners today of 12%. CrowdStrike shares up 9.3%. On the flip side, Lockheed Martin stock down more than 9%. GM shares down 9%. NVIDIA stock rebounding today, up $10.57 to $128 and change, a gain of 9%. And Apple continues on a roll ahead of its earnings news on Thursday, up $8.40 at $238.26. Gold at $2,770 an ounce right now, $3.20, and crude oil hovering just below $74 a barrel. And now the latest news here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues in 790 KBC. The sudden rise of the Chinese artificial intelligence startup DeepSeek sent shockwaves through Wall Street this week. DeepSeek bursting onto the scene just last weekend. And DeepSeek, some of the big tech names this week, the Chinese artificial intelligence startup DeepSeek launched a free AI assistant over the weekend, which it claimed used less data at a fraction of the cost of existing services. And DeepSeek this week overtook rival ChatGPT in downloads at the Apple App Store. Now, the Chinese startup DeepSeek raising the prospect of cheaper artificial intelligence models, sparking the tech sell-off this week and weighing on broader investor sentiment. We did see a bit of a rebound today after the NASDAQ closed down more than 600 points yesterday. It closed higher by just about 400 points today. And NVIDIA, which took an epic hit yesterday, did rebound by 9%. Now, the Wall Street Journal reports President Trump has a new task at the top of his rapid-fire agenda, confronting China's AI prowess. DeepSeek said it achieved the AI results on par with the best U.S. models at lower cost and without top-performing chips in advance that would tilt the global tech race, despite the Biden administration's export controls on semiconductors. Joining us live now is China expert Gordon Chang. China expert and author of numerous books, including The Coming Collapse of China, The Great U.S.-China Tech War, and his latest, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. On X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find Gordon Chang at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for taking the call on this big story here this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much, Frank.
All right, what do you make of this DeepSeek? What do we need to know about it?
Well, the important thing is that it is open source. We can take a look at it. People have duplicated it, and it is indeed a revolutionary breakthrough for the reasons you mentioned. But the other hand, we got to remember that DeepSeek, like all AI, collects data, and it's being collected and stored in the People's Republic of China, which means it is a danger to the United States because we know that China misuses data. So on the one hand, it's a great advance, but on the other hand, we've got to be extremely concerned.
A great advance for China. Is this a shot across the bow at U.S. tech, and what does it mean in the China-U.S. tech war that you write about?
Well, it certainly is a shot across the bow because they were able to accomplish, apparently at less cost and in a much shorter time frame, an AI model that is better than ours. But we got to remember that this is an ever-evolving race, and I'm sure that people are going to take the open source material and they are going to improve upon it. So we're going to see a competitive process like we have never witnessed before, because right now this is both countries considered it to be critical. So I'm sure that we are going to find some very interesting developments in the weeks and months to come.
How impactful do you think will this be on the global economy? Already, it looks like it impacted the price of oil and other other things. Bitcoin also took a hit on this yesterday, rebounding somewhat today, and talk that this development will be disinflationary and so forth. What impact will this have?
Well, I think those things are going to continue because obviously it needs less energy, which means less oil, as you point out. And of course, it's going to be much cheaper. This really puts into question the U.S. effort, $500 billion into Stargate. Maybe we don't need that type of money. I think, though, that in this type of competition, you could have a kid in a basement in the Bronx being able to duplicate something like this and advancing the cause even further. We saw Sam Altman the last day or so say, look, we're going to come out with some much better stuff in the very near future. I'm sure that that's right. But we don't necessarily need maybe the big institutions like OpenAI. Maybe we can actually do this at a much cheaper cost. One other thing, Frank, and that is we know how good this is, but we don't know if their claims about how long it took and how much money it took are indeed true. Because remember, in China, everything is controlled, which means that maybe the Chinese government spent a lot of money on this and handed it over to the DeepSeek people in order to create this wave, because they certainly have shocked the world with this. And maybe that was one of the goals of the Communist Party. In other words, to try to intimidate everybody into thinking that China is ahead in the AI race.
That's a very excellent point. And what they claim it cost $6 million. Is that what they claim?
That's what they claim, but we really don't know. I mean, as I said, with OpenAI source, I mean, we can see it, but we can't see the claims because we don't really know how this was developed.
All right. Now, the Biden administration imposed export controls on semiconductors. Was there a failure there that led to this, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, there certainly was a failure in the Biden administration on this, and that's because we have had sanctions which are not comprehensive. They've been imposed with months of notice, giving China the ability to get around them, and they haven't been vigorously enforced. And this was the same general problem in the Trump administration as well, not with AI, but with Huawei Technologies, their premier networking company. So we have to rethink sanctions as a country. They've got to be far more comprehensive. They've got to be imposed with no notice, and they've got to be enforced with everything we got.
All right. What do you expect President Trump to do to confront, as the Wall Street Journal says, confront China's AI prowess given this new development?
He actually called this favorable for the world because he thought it would have the advantages for businesses. I don't know if he's going to impose those sanctions because we don't know what his China policy is going to be. But I think he clearly needs to do that, to deny China the chips that it needs to make the advances on AI and in other things. But his China policy very much is up in the air right now, so we don't know where he's going to go.
So many headlines minute by minute. I believe the U.S. Navy has imposed a ban on the use of this for its personnel, for example. I did see that across the wires earlier today.
Well, it has to be. I mean, no American should be using this because everything is being pipelined to the Chinese regime. This is like TikTok in that regard. And although DeepSeek is better than our AI, I think that we have a national security interest here. We have a national interest in making sure that all of our information, our data, our learning, our tech doesn't end up in the hands of the Communist Party, because that's what will happen if people use DeepSeek.
And speaking of TikTok, President Trump says he wants to see a bidding war over a TikTok sale. What do you think is going to happen with TikTok?
Well, I hope there's not a bidding war because that puts more money into China's hands. The important thing here, two things. First of all, we have to make sure that the data isn't pipelined to Beijing, as it is now with TikTok. And as important, or probably more important, we have to make sure that China does not control the algorithm for the app, because China's been using that algorithm not only to propagate its narratives, but also to promote illicit drug use, self-harm, foment violence on American streets. These are things which China has used to attack the United States. We cannot allow China to control that algorithm.
In the meantime, TikTok for quite some time now has been the number one social media platform. The damage, if any, has certainly been done, right?
Well, there's certainly a lot of damage because, although Trump said, well, this is just information on kids, what's the big deal? The point is that every American president, every Supreme Court justice, every Speaker of the House was once a young kid, and 170 million of them are on TikTok. So we're going to have a future generation of American leaders who China will know a lot about, too much about. So yes, a lot of damage has been done, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to minimize the damage going forward, which is obviously what we need to do right now.
China expert Gordon Chang, the author of The Coming Collapse of China, the Great U.S.-China Tech War, in his latest book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. You can see him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Frank.
And right out to the freeways now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Inflation, jobs, the economy will be back in focus tomorrow after the Federal Reserve wraps up a two-day policy setting meeting. Also, the impact of the Southern California firestorms may also be taken into account. The Federal Reserve kicking off its two-day policy setting meeting today, the first meeting this year. The Fed funds futures traders expecting no change in interest rates tomorrow, but maybe we'll see some surprises. What's going to happen tomorrow? What is the outlook for short-term interest rates this year and the economy? Let's bring in Greg McBRIDE now, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com. Greg McBRIDE, great to have you with us here this afternoon.
Great to be with you, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Size things up for us, set the stage for what we can expect tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, the Fed has moved to the sidelines for now. They cut interest rates by a total of 1 full percentage point in the latter part of 2024, but the progress on getting inflation down also stalled out late in the year. And so at this point, they've got to start to see inflation resume that progress toward 2%. And I think can't be a one-hit wonder. It's got to be sustained progress. You need to see, I think, a couple months worth of data across various inflation barometers to really get that confidence. So for now, the Fed is on the sidelines holding interest rates steady until they're more comfortable with where inflation is headed. Only then will they resume cutting interest rates.
President Trump now back in office with rapid-fire executive orders that will impact business and the economy. What about that part of the equation here now and his desire to see interest rates come down?
Yeah, I mean, economic growth has continued to surprise to the upside, and there's certainly a lot of optimism with the new administration that less regulation and more things that are designed to boost growth, but could also boost inflation. And so I think that's another thing that the Fed is going to be watching, whether it's tariffs or the labor market. Just are there price pressures that start to reemerge as the year unfolds? If so, that is certainly going to be a barrier to the Fed reducing interest rates.
And now added to the mix, this DeepSeek development, this Chinese artificial intelligence model, which we're told was put together at a fraction of the cost of the AI models that American firms have put out. What about that aspect? There's already talk that this is going to be disinflationary and will have other impacts.
Well, it's a little like calling a no-hitter in the first inning. I think we'll have to see. I mean, the name of the game in technology is, the ever-present risk is that a competitor comes along with something that's better, cheaper, faster, and that's, I don't. The market reaction we saw yesterday, I think, is reflection of the fact that investors tend to sell first and ask questions later when there's something that disrupts those future earnings expectations. But is it something that's going to necessarily impact the broader economy or even investor psyche going forward? I think it's far too early to say. It was one sharp down day, but you saw a little bit of that clawed back today. So I think it's way too early to read into that in terms of a market impact or economic impact.
It was also noted DeepSeek, the advent of this also impacted the price of oil on concerns or expectations that if this is indeed the case, that that would take less energy to accomplish what AI is doing. So that's another interesting aspect. And of course, President Trump being a pro fossil fuel and made the drill baby drill announcement just a little over a week ago. That has already put downward pressure on oil. So energy prices were largely responsible for that tremendous spike in inflation we saw during the Biden years. So at least consumers seem to be getting some relief on the energy front here.
Well, we did see oil prices climb back a little bit today. I mean, they've certainly been up over the last couple of months. The price pressures that we saw in the consumer price index in November and December were a lot of them were centered around energy, and that was an area where we kind of thought inflation had been tamped down. Energy and food, we did see a bit of a resurgence in November and December. So I think, as we move through 2025, are those price pressures that continue, or do we see those abate a little bit? I think that's going to be key to what happens with inflation and whether or not we're going to get closer to 2%, or if we're going to stay in this holding pattern near 3%.
Right. That's those days you were talking about. That's when oil was up around $80 a barrel. Now it's below $74 a barrel. Southern California recovering from the horrific firestorms we saw in the last couple of weeks. What impact do you think this will have on the economy, and might the Fed take notice of this disaster here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of supply concerns, I think, that will revolve around that. Labor supply, commodities, and material supplies, which that could be potentially inflationary. It also, we saw what impact that the supply constraints had coming out of the pandemic. If you see something similar, maybe on a smaller scale, but something similar, could that ignite price pressures that the Fed has been able to tamp down so far, whether that's in the labor market or just, in some of the materials shortages, that could certainly have a ripple effect economically.
Yep. Greg McBRIDE, thank you very much for joining us live here, Chief Financial Analyst at Bankrate.com, live here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC.
Hey, my name is Mandy Woodruff Santos, career expert and host of the podcast Brown Ambition. Brown Ambition is conversations about wealth building. Being rich really helps. You should be rich. Entrepreneurship. Women of color are the fastest growing entrepreneur in the country. Whatever, it's fine. And being surrounded by sister friends.
Mandy, mention your name on the podcast. You have made it. I was like, oh my God, I have made it.
Brown Ambition. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.